Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Jorge Sanchez, who's running a very interesting business in the Denver area. And from what I'm reading, you are servicing many cities outside of Denver as well. And you are in the chauffeur transportation management business that you and your wife have been running for quite some time. So if you just take a moment to introduce yourself and the company you're representing, that would be great, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Well, first of all, Matt, thanks for having me. And yeah, excited to be here and kind of share our story. So yeah, we've been in business now for about 18 years. Company is Hermes Worldwide, based in Denver, where we currently reside. And we focus on passenger transportation. It's a chauffeur business, and while we're headquartered in Denver, we have some remote offices in Vail, the Vail Valley, so in Vail as well as Aspen. And then we provide those services for our clients all over the globe. It's 24/7 operation, 365. We're never shut down. It can definitely be interesting considering everything that goes on in the world in any given moment to try to make sure everything goes well for our clients.
So you actually are servicing clients worldwide. I was assuming that was just within the Colorado areas, especially those dream destinations you've mentioned: Denver, Vail, Aspen. I mean, everyone wants to go there in the winter time, especially in the winter time.
Right.
But you are well. We're gonna get into that. But take me back to 2007. Based on my research, you did not do anything related to personal transportation before 2007, and then yet you started a company with your wife. Is that correct? Take me back to that. What led to the decision?
Yes, the story actually started prior to 2007, even though we had zero plans of ever getting into business on our own or particularly chauffeur transportation. I was a IT consultant, so I was traveling 75% of the year. And so I was actually a consumer. I started out with cabs and it kind of morphed from there because we found that the cabs are very unreliable in terms of timing because I don't like to sit at the airport for 2 hours earlier than I need to. So I would figure out my travel time, traffic, all of that, and say, okay, well, if I want to be at the airport by a certain time, here's what time I'll have the cab come pick me up. And they were notoriously unreliable. They were almost always late, sometimes as much as 20, 30 minutes late. And because I didn't know which cab was picking me up, you call dispatch, and they could rarely tell you what time they would be there. And so there was a couple times where I came very close to missing my flight, and it was very stressful because I was traveling on business, and probably even more stressful if I was traveling with my family on vacation. But since it was just me, it was still stressful. I didn't like that experience. I also didn't like in the back seat where the vehicles weren't always clean. My knees were, I'm not even a big guy. I'm only 5'9", but my knees would be up in my chest because they would have the seat so far back and they couldn't really push it up because they have that plexiglass, typically on the back. And I hated everything about the experience. And so that quickly led to, I got friendly with one cab driver who was always on time. And I had met him and we were just talking on the ride. He's like, "Oh, you can actually schedule me directly." I was like, "Oh, really? Like, I just call you directly?" He's like, "Yeah, we have to pay a weekly fee, regardless of how much money we make. So you could just call me directly." So I started doing that, scheduling with him. But then sometimes he would be oversold, and he had a friend who used to be a cab driver that owned a single town car. He's like, "Hey, I can't pick you up. I have another client, but I have a friend of mine who you can trust. I'll coordinate. You just pay him directly, and he'll come pick you up." And I'll lead into where kind of this led to this global business with that idea of relying on partners. And so he started picking me up in a town car, and I was traveling a lot and using both of them. While the first guy that was a taxi cab driver, he eventually lost his driver's license, so he must have got too many tickets or something. So I couldn't use him anymore. But now I have the town car guy, so I was calling him, and he was doing the same thing. If he couldn't pick me up, he'd call one of his partners, and it was the same rate. And sometimes experience was the same, sometimes it wasn't. But ultimately, that kind of sparked an interest. Like, oh, they've built a small little local network to bring as much business as they can. So again, still had no thoughts of going into business for myself. Well, through all this, I was also going to school at the University of Denver in the Daniels College of Business and was getting my master's degree in business. And everything we studied was about globalization, how technology, air travel was just shrinking the borders, and so you can actually meet with people. And so that's what I was studying. And then also during December, my business would effectively shut down because At that time of year, we were always dealing with corporate Fortune 500 companies, and they typically had all of their money spent come December. And so even without having to take vacation, I was essentially on vacation for the month of December. A town car driver was telling me like, "Hey, I need to I need to get some help." He was just telling me because I'm too busy and I have a stretch limo and then I have this town car and I just can't keep moving enough because I don't have enough drivers. I'm like, well, I've been in the service industry my whole life from the time I started, waiting tables when I was 12 years old when I wasn't supposed to be, but I was. Um, to doing landscaping, to doing IT, to working in restaurants, to coaching youth and baseball. Like I was always serving others. And, I had a decent attire because I was in business. And so I was like, well, I can dress in a suit. I know I can drive safely. I know what it means to serve others. I'll just work part-time for you during the holidays, during December, and earn some extra, scratch for my family for the holidays. And he's like, oh, really? So he kind of trained me on it. I started doing it on the side, and I'm a hustler. So, of course, doing 2 or 3 jobs a week wasn't enough for me. Like every time I had extra time in the evenings or on the weekends, or if it was really early in the morning, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. trip before I started my day, I'm like, I'll take it. And so I would do it. And I mean, I'd earn, I don't know, maybe $20, $25 a trip going to the airport, maybe sometimes 40. And if I went up to the mountains, I might earn, I don't know, 80 to 120 bucks, for 4 or 5 hours of my time, which for me, I didn't really care because I'm just earning extra money. Like my primary job, which paid me well, was our primary source of income, benefits, everything. So I was like, this is just extra, right? Kind of speed it up a little bit. That town hard drive, like, you know what? I've been approached about selling the business. Oh, and I had graduated too, by the way. So he's like, I've been approached about selling my business. And he was telling me to take me to the airport. I was like, are you thinking about it? And he's like, yeah, maybe. I'm getting up there in age. It might be a good time to get out. So I said, I started thinking, my wheels started turning like, hey, I can put my MBA skills to the test here and evaluate the business. So I started evaluating the business and I said, will you let me take a run at it? He's like, well, sure. And he showed all his financials with me and everything. And come to find out, he wanted way too much money for his business. Like I was very naive and I'd never bought a business. I was newly minted MBA graduate, so I didn't have a lot of experience, but I had enough experience to know he wanted way too much. So that never materialized. But through that exercise, all of a sudden the word got spread into the industry locally that I was looking to buy a car service. That was further from the truth. It just happened to be right in front of me. So through that network, they connected me with this older couple who were looking to sell. They were just tired. The business was starting to fail. I looked at it and they had some really good corporate accounts. They had some financial firms here in town. They also had law firms. They had some weekly travelers who were consultants, not necessarily in IT like me, but they traveled every single week. And so they had a good core business. So I looked at that and based on what their asking price was, I got it for about 25% less than what they were asking. And so I thought I was a hot shot. I was like, wow, I was able to use my skills. I got them 25% lower than what they're asking. I felt pretty good, right? Well, knowing what I know now, 10, 15 years into it, I realized I still way overpaid. Knowing what I know now, I way overpaid. But it all worked out. I was able to get a price point where we're able to afford it. As I told you before, I'm a hustler. I don't sit back and just kind of do things slowly. Like I was all in. And so for about 3.5 years, I was working my full-time IT job. I was doing this on the side, early mornings, late at nights, weekends, and then my wife was helping me because she was taking care of our 2 kids at home. So she would take them to school, and then which coincided with my work schedule. So that way, when the kids are at school, she was working the business. And so that's kind of what led us to, where we're at. And then 18 years later, we got a pretty successful business. Don't know if that's more than
That's
you wanted to know, but that kind of is the story, what led me to where I am, because it was not planned by any means.
that's quite a story. I have so many questions. First question is, do you think that first guy did actually end up selling his, or do you know if he ended up selling his business, the one who severely overpriced his business?
I have no idea, to be honest with you. I mean, I was friendly with them, but I never actually followed up with him. I know, I talked about those partnerships. I think we used them a little bit as overflow when we first got started, but um, it just never materialized, the relationship beyond that. And I never followed up with them. So it's a good question. I probably should know.
Yeah, maybe another acquisition for you there, if he's still in the business. But that would be quite
Right.
miserable if you wanted to 17 or 18 years ago, he would be still in business. Well,
Yeah.
maybe he consider lowering his price, but that's interesting to know. And also, you beat me. I started working when I was 14, so you were
Okay.
12. Great,
Yeah.
great on that. Now, in the beginning, I mean, everyone who probably listen to you will feel lazy next to you listening to your story with so many different things you were doing in the beginning. What were the initial challenges as you took when you took over the business and you had to figure it out, and you still had obviously limited time because of other engagements. So what were the challenges in the very beginning?
For me, it was more personal because I had a young family at that time. I think see 2007, a 12-year-old daughter at the time, a 10-year-old son, and a 4-year-old son. And I enjoyed spending time with them, and my kids were very active. And so it really came down to balancing that time between my primary business to make sure I got food on the table, we had health benefits, and can pay the mortgage, starting to have an entrepreneurial spirit and wanting to build that, but yet not forgetting why was I doing it, right? I wasn't doing it because I wasn't driven by, oh, I want to be rich, I want to make a ton of money. I wanted to be more of my own boss, so to speak, and I didn't want to sacrifice that time with my kids. And so there's a lot of family photos of us being on family vacation, and I'm on the phone, working the side business during that. But that was probably the biggest challenge is the time. And then when you have a failure, whether that was a service issue with a particular job or you lost some business, whether it was under your control or not, accepting that failure and to continue moving forward, that those were challenges for me because I don't like losing. I tell people I hate losing more than I enjoy winning. And so when I lose something, whether it's under my control or not, it burns me like, what could I have done differently? How could I have handled something? How could I negotiate differently? Just what could I have done? And that's, some of the early challenges that I faced as on my entrepreneurial path.
How did MBA and your skills, other than the negotiation skills and negotiating the price down 25%, how did it help you, you would say, maybe even now? I mean, in the early stages and as you grew, and obviously you're still in the business prospering. So how do you think it helped you if you look back in the time?
One thing, being very comfortable speaking to people I have no history with, that they don't know me, I don't know them, because we would have to speak, right? We would have to present. And so going through that practice of trying to become an SME, a subject matter expert on whatever the topic was, studying it, knowing it inside and out, trying to anticipate what questions they may ask, and then being able to stand in front of 1 to 100 people that they only know you by meeting you at that moment, and being comfortable in that, acting confident, even though inside you may not be, right? And so that experience has really helped me because there's also a lot of proposal writing and evaluating businesses and their marketing plans and their strategic growth plans and all these different things. And so really it just trains your mind. I think of it kind of like when you train your body, but you're training your mind how to think, how to problem solve, how to see that potential obstacle around the corner. Just all that studying just really helped me throughout my business now and still helps me today because I'm feel much more confident speaking to people, even though I'm not a public speaker, but I can walk into a boardroom with a bunch of executives. I'm not nervous at all, right? But it also comes with preparation. So that's really been helpful to me. And then, being able to write proposals, trying to speak to the client, like, I can see something one way, but you yourself, Matt, you may look at something differently, right? And so I have to figure out, okay, well, who's my audience and how can I speak to them to where I connect with them and to where what I'm sharing with them is meaningful. Because I can talk all day long about how great I think I am, but they may only care about one thing, and maybe it's price. Well, no matter how great I tell them I am, how nice our cars are, and how friendly my staff is, and our on-time success rate, all these different things, none of that they may not care about. All they care about price is trying to speak to people and read them and understand what are their drivers is critically important. While throughout my MBA studies and all the different courses and engagements and stuff we had, I think it just helped prepare me for all of it.
You said you wouldn't consider yourself a public speaker, but that's essentially the core characteristic of a public speaker, knowing your audience and having essentially the knowledge in advance how to what do they care about and how to
Mhm.
approach it. So you should consider some public speaking gigs here and there. Now you did have to use your negotiation skills on multiple occasions. Can you walk us through some, to obviously the degree you can, through the strategic acquisitions you've done? I'm thinking about the Vail one and Aspen. on those two locations, if you could walk us through that.
Yeah, so Aspen was a little bit more straightforward because it was a partner of ours that was up there that we used for overflow because our business was growing up there. And unfortunately, she had some health issues and her family had a wellness check done and unfortunately she had perished. So the family had reached out to me at some point through the process, like, hey, there's a business here, like, let's see what money we can get for it and then pass it on to, other our niece and our family because she didn't have a spouse or any kids to pass that on to. And so I negotiated with them. It was pretty straightforward as fair. I didn't feel good about taking advantage of the fact that someone is deceased. And so I just treated it as if though she was still alive and said, well, what's the business currently worth? Obviously it was like vultures where there's a lot of local people in that market were trying to say, okay, well, she's gone. Let's try to grab those clients. And they were successful in doing some of that. And so I had a good rapport with I think it was her brother in terms of negotiating that. And I just offered them, what was fair value on the fleet as well as the service and then, how we paid them out. And so it was pretty straightforward. On the Vail side, it was still straightforward as a good owner that was just looking to get out. He had had enough. And so I asked him, what are your objectives? What are you looking for? Right. And so when I understood what his objectives were, then I also interjected just something for him to consider because the very first company I had bought, when I talked to that seller afterwards, he's like, you know what, the one thing I really screwed up on was you gave me all the money up front, and man, that was a hefty tax bill. So I ended up giving a lot more to the government than I would have liked. So that always stuck in the back of my head. Like whenever I sell, I'm going to have to consider taxes, try to preserve as much of the value of the business as I can. So with the Vail acquisition, I mentioned, I'm like, listen, do you want it all up front? I can give it to you all up front. However, just keep in mind you could get hit with a hefty tax bill. So if you want to spread it out over 3 years, that helps me out. It'll help you out in terms of avoid paying too much more than you need to in taxes, and so we're able to negotiate that way. So it's just a process of learning all these different things, both from a buyer and a seller standpoint. Even though I've never sold yet, but I've spoken with people after the fact. And so again, it starts with what are your objectives? Like, do you need all the money right now because you want to get out, you want to move away and never look back? Do you want some part in the business still? Do you want to spread out the payments? Do we do it all at once? Do we do seller financing? Things of those natures.
That's actually super interesting because that's why there are so many strategies when it comes to merger and acquisitions to essentially to avoid paying high taxes or figuring out how to do a 1031 exchange or similar
Mm-hmm.
to offset those taxes and actually have something that doesn't require your time and it's not maybe as stressful as running day-to-day operations and still having some income from it. But that's something definitely to consider when it comes to those acquisitions, exiting the business. Pretty interesting. Now, who do you primarily serve at Hermes Worldwide?
So we started out corporate, and that was our primary focus, just dealing with corporate travelers. So whether that's C-suite, whether it's executive assistants, whether it's corporate meeting planners, whether it's the traveling consultant, that was our primary bread and butter, and that's all we focused on. But it kind of grew from there to where now we service just about every single vertical. And they kind of morphed because what happened was, I mentioned earlier we had some financial clients with the first company we bought. We also had some accounting firms as well as law firms. And then they would have these smaller treats, whether it was a board of directors, whether it was a small C-suite, whether it was their executive management, to have these offsite meetings and then say, hey, can you handle all this? And so we said, sure. Sometimes it'd be as small as 10, 12, sometimes as much as 100 people. And so it's just moving people left and right in different size vehicles as efficiently as possible. Well, that eventually led to us saying, okay, now we're starting at a point where they're trying to move enough people where we don't have a big enough fleet between our sedans, our SUVs, and our vans. And so we had to get into some buses. Well, we started using some local bus companies, and we just found the service levels were very sporadic. They didn't meet our standards consistently. And over time, our clients are like, can you just please get into the bus business? Like, we understand this service failure wasn't your fault. We know exactly what happened, but we would prefer to just use you. And so that kind of led us going down in the buses. And we start out with the small, what we refer to as a mini coach, which, be 20 to 30 passengers. And started getting into that business, eventually led to the full size 56 passenger motor coaches that we have now. Well, moving all these people in these buses, that kind of led to, oh, okay, well, now that they have these buses, we can move more people. So that led to youth groups, that led to sports teams at every level, from high school to collegiate and now into professional. Then that eventually led us into, because of our service standards, that led us into hospitality. So we're dealing with a lot of the key hospitality accounts and hotel accounts in the market. And so we were able to move a lot of people. That led to even more meeting planners, both independent third party as well as DMCs, what we refer to as destination management companies, because they help them move and put on big productions and move a lot of people, sometimes into the thousands. And so it led to that, a lot of church groups, youth groups, and then because of those buses, how comfortable they are, also led to over-the-road charters. So we take people across state lines, anywhere that there's pavement or sometimes not pavement, just dirt roads, we can take them. That ultimately also led to the wedding market. So wedding market is a huge niche for us that they like the service levels as well as what our fleet looks like. And then also that also led to government doing some Department of Defense contracts as well. So there's really no vertical that we don't touch, from, like I said, from sports and entertainment, concerts, top end hotels, 5-star hotels. I mentioned government, mentioned youth group, church groups, still a heavy focus and emphasis on meeting planning and corporate. Um,
Wow.
Pretty much anything you need.
It's anyone who in every group that needs transportation you can serve. That's interesting. Are there any partnerships that you hope to seal? I mean, lockdown maybe a better word. I don't know how to say it, but essentially a new partnerships that you could imagine working really well. One company comes to mind, like Wheels Up, which is a private jet company. I can
Mhm.
imagine when you essentially drop off someone at the airport, they need to go to the next destination. So Wheels Up came to mind. Maybe some corporate accounts and people in the finance world use those type of transportation, air transportation. So are there any partnerships that you had in mind for the future?
So we're always open to that. We're always exploring those types of opportunities. The challenge with those brokers, we refer to them as, they have to have a margin there for them to stay in business long term, right? And so they really lean on the supplier to take the hit. And we're in a very fortunate position where we can be very selective about that. And while I never want to misconstrue that we always have enough business, but we have enough business such that we don't have to take too big of a hit in any sort of partnership, and we can pass on things. And so we really focus on creating our own relationships with our clients directly, because then we get to control the relationship, and we also don't have as much reliance on these brokers that are out there, because there's a lot of them, from black car service to the buses to airport shuttle services. You can do a lot, but you're doing it at a very low rate. And I don't want to be low margins, high volume. I'd rather be large margins, lower volume, and really focus on the service side of it. And that's really our bread and butter and our niche. Like you can go to our Google reviews and just see what our clients are saying. It's always focused on the service side, from our chauffeurs to the vehicles, to the friendliness of our staff, to our performance, like that. That's really what we want to focus on. So if it means that I have to grow slower and I'm not as large, I'm okay with that, because I want all of our clients to know, when they need to make sure things go well, they know exactly where to go and who to come to. And that's really our focus. And we've been very successful with that.
Smart. I feel like higher margin, lower volume allows you to also provide better care to your and better service to your customer. Speaking of which, you mentioned Google reviews, and I remember seeing a video from your office, I believe, where you did some training for the team. What else does set you apart in that market, and maybe amongst competitors, if there are any that can compete with you at this level? Yeah, so what do your, maybe let's phrase it this way, what do your customers and clients care about the most that you provide for them, or maybe you started providing for them because they needed it?
Reliability is
Reliability.
really what it comes down to. Reliability. Because listen, when you're in logistics of any sort, things are going to happen. And things beyond your control, whether it's traffic, weather, accident, a mechanical breakdown, a flat tire, no matter what it is, no matter what you do to prevent everything, at some point you're going to have a failure. Sometimes it's your fault and sometimes it's not. We've been very fortunate where the majority of our service failures are not our fault, but it's how you handled that. And so one of the key things I've always preached to my team is, we don't lie, because you can only tell a client so many times, we were running late. Oh, but we got a flat tire. Like, you could use it one time. That's it. You can't keep relying on that. So I tell them, don't lie, be truthful, but also have a plan, is to be able to tell them precisely, here's what we're doing to mitigate it. And so that communication is key. And so our clients have come to appreciate, like, hey, even when they do fail, we know that they're going to call us. They probably have a plan in place and they're doing everything they can to minimize the impact to us. And that's the goal, right? Is we're going to go out of our way to make sure you're taken care of, no matter what it costs us. I mean, there's been times I've eaten hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars in order to make sure the client's taken care of. It sucks, but a lot of people refer to it as the cost of doing business. And so we just got to make sure that we take care of our client. And what that's done is it's create a very strong loyalty base. And the other thing that people I don't think always realized in our industry is it also creates outside salespeople that you don't have to pay for. They are actually paying you to use your services. And if you knock it out of the park consistently, they refer you and they brag about you to everybody in their network. And all of a sudden now you've got a free outside salesperson. If you think about it, they're actually paying you to be a salesperson
Yeah.
when it comes down to it.
Pretty good deal. And word of mouth is still a huge thing.
Yep.
And you can, obviously leverage social media for it. So if people share on social media publicly that they were using your services and they recommend you, that's even compounds. So yeah, that's definitely a very customer centric approach. Pays well dividends over years to come. Now, what's your take on electric vehicles and maybe even autonomous driverless cars in the future? Do you think it will become a thing in the next decade or two, maybe even quicker, especially autonomous driver? I mean, electric vehicles are here obviously predominant, especially I mean in areas like California, you see 10 electric vehicles for one regular car. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, let's first start with electric vehicles. So I bought a Lucid Air that I use for my company vehicle probably about 3 years ago now. I wanted to test it out. It was extremely expensive at the time. They're still expensive, but not as much. I liked it. And the reason why I liked it is there's just so much focus on the car manufacturing, on the driver experience and the passenger experience. Well, for the everyday driver for my own personal vehicle, for you and I, and for most everyone, that's what it should be focused on, right? You're not so much worried about who's in the back seat. Oftentimes it'll be a pet, it'll be your kid that's in a car seat, whatever it might be. But for our industry, we need to provide a good experience in the back seat. And so I just haven't really found a lot of manufacturers that give enough creature comforts back there to make it worthwhile. Of course, the big ones like Mercedes and BMW, they're always at the top of mind when it comes to luxury and experience overall. But I bought a Lucid Air because I liked the legroom it provided in the back. I'd done Teslas prior and I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not even a big person, but like the top, my head would be touching the top. And I'm just like, man, you get someone that's 6 foot, 6'4" or taller, it's going to be uncomfortable for them. But the Lucid Air provides a lot of rear creature comforts as well as it's a leather type interior. So it's just comfortable overall. And so I started test driving that. But one of the things I found with electric vehicles is in Colorado during the winter, when it gets bitterly cold, the battery drains quicker. And I called Lucy. I'm like, hey, just so you know, this is going on. Like, yeah, we know. And it's sort of by design in that it has to use more of its power to keep the battery warm. So if you think about it, if you're, sub 20-degree temperatures and plus you're driving on the highway, that wind makes it even colder. And so your range goes down a lot quicker. And Lucid is known for having one of the longest ranges in the EV industry. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, if I got one of these other EVs where maybe it's 200 to 300 mile capacity on a warm, flat day, flat road day. Now, if they're in this condition, now we can maybe go 125 to 175 miles. And sometimes that's not going to work for us, especially when we go long routes. The other challenge is when it comes to refueling. I can go to any, gas station and within 5 minutes fill up and I'm back on the road with a full tank. Well, you kind of really have to plan your day with these EVs because in 5 minutes you're not going to get much mileage, right? You might, depending if you're in a supercharger or not, you might get an extra 10, 15 miles added to the battery life. And so like when I've done long distance trips, I'm like, wow, I literally have to plan a meal around this, put it on a supercharger, let it charge for an hour, and then I'll use that as my meal break. Well, if it's my personal vehicle, I can do that. But if I have a client in the car and this does come up where they're having to take us across straight lines, it's like, hey, we have to find something to do and sit around for an hour. That's not really, convenient to the client. And so that's the drawbacks of it. They're starting to get more power, more distance in terms of range. They're very powerful, but I don't want my chauffeurs, speeding around town anyways, but they are very powerful and I do like them. you know, being able to keep the AC on, even when you get out of the vehicle, or the heater to keep the vehicle warm. They're heavier vehicles. A lot of times they're all-wheel drive, and so for us in Colorado, they do pretty well in the snow. Not as good as a SUV and a four-wheel drive, but they still do pretty well, which is really good. And I do like them, but I think it depends on the application. If you're in a warmer weather client and there's a bigger network and you're able to install some fast chargers in your facility, I think there's a good application for them, because the maintenance I've found on them so far is negligible compared to a standard gas powered vehicle. And so those are some of the positives. Autonomous vehicles, let's kind of switch there. I know, my industry, we start talking about this. Um, back when Uber and Lyft were really getting going, and then the autonomous vehicles, there was kind of thoughts like, hey, in 5 years, we're going to be able to replace our chauffeurs. And all of a sudden, our profit margins are going to go through the roof. Well, that didn't materialize, because here we are 10 years later, and the technology isn't far enough along in order to rely on them. Now, I know there's markets, I believe, like in Arizona and in California, and I forget somewhere else, maybe somewhere in Texas, where they're really starting to use them. And I think for fixed routes, set routes, and you don't have a lot of weather to deal with, it would work really well. And the technology has come a long ways, even since I've been in this industry for the last 10 years. But there are still some key things that the autonomous vehicles still have to address. One, if you think about like on a road, they're always marking the roads, right? The yellow lines, the dashed lines to identify your lanes. Well, there's a lot of areas where the paint gets rubbed off, and so they don't exist. Now, us as humans, we can just see by the landscape, we know generally where that lane is, and we can stay in the lane. I've noticed both with Mercedes and as well with Lucid, sometimes they struggle in those environments. And then they'll struggle even more so if it's dark, and then if it's raining, because then, and if the lighting's not really good. So that's another challenge. And then another challenge would be, okay, well, the landscape change in Colorado, we can have, like in March, sometimes in April, will be a sunny day like it is for me today. And all of a sudden we'll get 6 to 8 inches of snow. And then if the plows come in and they create these snow plows, autonomous vehicles say, hey, wait a minute, there was a street post there before. Now there's this big object that, I assume with the technology is going to look like a boulder. It's like that wasn't there before, right? And so how do you handle when the environmental things change on a dime? And then the other challenge, I think, too, is identifying objects, right? If I'm a human and I'm going on the street and I see a soccer ball roll into the street and a kid chasing it, and it's either I hit the kid or I veer off to my right and run into a telephone pole or embankment, of course I'm going to go into the embankment to avoid, hitting a human. I don't know that the autonomous technology is going to be able to identify that. I heard early on, I don't know if it's still true today, but I heard early on, it just sees it all as an object and it's going to try to avoid it. But how's it going to determine, well, which is the safer bet? So I think there will be a place for it. I do think that it'll come. I personally didn't feel it was going to come as some of my colleagues thought, and at least in that case, I was proven right. But then you also have the liability piece, because let's face it, accidents happen all the time. So when an accident will happen, because it already has, particularly like in Arizona, who's liable? Is it the person that owns the vehicle? If it was on autonomous driving, well, if it's an autonomous mode, why is it their fault, right? Is it the manufacturer of the vehicle? Well, even if it's the manufacturer who built it, it's software who was created by somebody else, right? And oftentimes that software development company may contract out some of the software development as well. So even if I'm the software development firm that created the autonomous software, I likely might be depending on other companies to build certain pieces and components of it, right? And so now you got, a handful of different companies and people that are involved in, well, where does the blame lie? And making it right for whoever was done wrong, whether, hey, my vehicle needs to be replaced or something, far worse, medical bills or some injury that wasn't taken care of. And so we all know with attorneys, I mean, they'll drag that out as long as they can to show that, hey, it's not my client's responsibility. Well, ultimately it has to be somebody's. And in the end, the insurance companies always try not to pay out anyway. So like, hey, we're not paying out because it's someone else's fault. So in the end, I just think that there's still a lot more questions to be answered before it can be something that we're going to see every day on the road. Honestly, and maybe in the next 20 years, 10 to 20 years, it wouldn't shock me that there's more and more autonomous vehicles, because I've even been in different vehicles from Genesis type vehicles. I mentioned Lucid Air, I mentioned Mercedes Benz. I'm trying to think who else on the top of my head that I've been in, and I can notice little subtle differences between all of them. And so some of them do certain things better than others. And so ultimately over time, I do think that it'll play a part. I just don't know how soon. And I don't know how much trusting I will be of them until I'm pretty confident that it's going to be able to make good decisions on it on a dime.
You just convinced me to not get into an autonomous driverless vehicle for next decade at least, based on what you said. You see them a lot in LA. I was
Yeah,
surprised to see human beings inside of it, and I was like, no one is behind the steering wheel. Like, what's happening here? When I first saw them, those like out of the movie, I will definitely not get into one of those for the next decade. And I'm just as you were describing it, like with the special the lanes and how it needs special infrastructure for them to operate. And imagine like France, I don't know if you've ever been to France, but the way they drive there and they have no signs on the, no lines, nothing on the road. And there's roundabouts in Europe. Roundabouts are
right.
very popular. So you have a bunch of roundabouts. So I get it. If you create a safe environment for it to operate, maybe, one city at a time, then at this point it potentially could work. And then there should be, I guess, special roads for them. I don't know, maybe to make it safer, so they don't have to deal with something unexpected. Maybe like you've mentioned, like kids. I'm not a human being. Maybe a bicycle driver or someone falling on the road, something like that. But that's for the future. We'll see how that's going to develop. But I hear that Tesla is starting or is thinking about, maybe they already do, to monetize your car when you are during the time you're on vacation. So essentially you would provide your Tesla as a taxi, driverless taxi in your city. So I guess it's coming sooner than later. So we'll see how that's going to play out.
Yeah,
But
I agree with you there, and I like that approach to monetize your home because that same thing happened in real estate, right? With Airbnb, where people
Airbnb,
start, they start with, oh, I'm going to monetize my spare bedroom that I have in my house and let people stay here with me, and then that eventually morphed into, well, actually the entire home. So sometimes people are like, well, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. Let me throw on Airbnb and see if I can make some money for it. And then that eventually led to, the short-term rental industry that, now it's like, hey, I have a home that's all we do is these type of short-term rentals. But I do think with the autonomous vehicles, I think the probably the safest application would be fixed routes like city buses, right? You mentioned because sometimes they have fixed lanes. And so it's predictable what the streets are. You can maintain that area, and it's predictable based on time, right? We got certain routes that we're doing, so you can communicate that to people. And then too, I could see like campus type applications too, like on large university campuses where they'll have a shuttle. It's on fixed routes and things of that nature. So I think those are some areas where it makes a lot of sense for the autonomous vehicles because they know exactly what they're doing. You can put them in environments like in Arizona, somewhere like in a Phoenix or Scottsdale or Southern California, or just certain areas where you don't have to a lot of varying weather conditions, that you have to deal with, whether it's sleet, rain, hail, snow, things like we would experience in Colorado.
and another thing, just to finish this part, we take energy for granted, even though we have abundant amounts of sun here in Southern California. Many other parts of the world don't have it, especially where I come from Europe, Eastern Central Europe. We were waiting for that sun to come out for months and months. But
Mhm.
also, like you had major power outages in Spain, Portugal. We were out of power this morning. I was worried that I'm not going to make it to the podcast today because we were out of power for like 30 minutes. And then imagine that, and then you have the hurricane season in Texas and then Florida. So imagine when you build that infrastructure and then no one can commute anywhere because for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe half a day, there's no power, no electricity, you can't charge it. And then you have to have some sort of backups. So there's still a lot that needs to be done, but obviously, it can be if it's going to be safer and because it will eliminate that tiredness, that human errors that happen, and hopefully we'll see some technology there.
One thought that I've talked to people about because Tesla has as well as a Lucid is they have the panoramic type glass roof, right? And I was thinking to myself, and I don't know, maybe they've thought about it and they just can't do it. I'm like, I wonder why they just don't turn that into a large solar panel.
There are
So
some.
for the electrical vehicles, I charge it on a supercharger or whatever, and like in my Lucid, I can get to 500 miles if I drive appropriately. But then you can extend even further, particularly if you're in a sunny place where even if it doesn't keep you infinitely charged to where you never have to stop, but I would think that that would extend your range, even if it could just kind of trickle charge your batteries a little bit while you're driving and there's a lot of sunlight. So I don't know if there's any technology out there if anyone's working on it, but it just seems like it would make a lot of sense to me.
I think Karma did, but they went out of business. Someone bought them again, I feel like. But Karma, they have like very specific shape of the car. It looks like a very futuristic car. It's like an S, I guess you can call it. Not sure if you're. I think they experimented with these roofs. I don't know if they still do, but I know that there will be also, for, especially for the buses that make frequent stops, those essentially touchless or chargings, where essentially you would drive over, for example, in the red light, and you will be charged from the ground up, and there's like renewable energy around it, where you can provide power to those stations, I guess you can call. So you don't have to touch it. Touchless drive charging would be is more likely than I feel like the roofs, even though it makes sense to me. But there's definitely some challenges with that. I don't remember what it was, but I think so far only Karma implemented it and it kind of didn't work. So we'll see how they're gonna play it out. And speaking of futuristic things, any artificial intelligence, maybe more towards like the within the operations of the business day to day, maybe sales, marketing, anything operation wise that you use like artificial intelligence AI for?
Yeah, so we're actually implementing a lot of different areas with it. I never want to get rid of the human element because studies have shown over and over that many people are comfortable with AI, they're comfortable with technology because sometimes you just want to speak to a human. And so I never want to get to the point where all I have is a bunch of bots and I have next to no human that you can talk to or make it very difficult. But we're doing it both operationally as well as from a sales standpoint. So like if you go to our website, there's a quote bot that's on there to where you can interact with it and it'll say, hey, what can I help you with? They're like, oh, I want a quote. And it'll go through and ask you some series of questions and it'll actually supply you the quote. And it never requires anyone from my office to get engaged. And it'll provide an accurate quote because it interfaces with our software development. There's also a link on there. If you want to speak to someone, you can just click on live agent. It'll connect you to a live agent. We're also, I haven't implemented it yet, but we're also having some AI that's reading our emails and that will be able to collect some information because we can train the AI. What's the minimal amount of information we need in order to provide a quote? So what we want to do is with that email is when it comes in, if you send in an email like, hey, I want to pick up on this date for 3 passengers and this is my drop off, but you didn't tell us where the pickup was, you didn't tell us what type of vehicle you wanted, and maybe you didn't tell us the time. Well, we can train AI to say, hey, here's a list of information that we need. And so we can read your email and say, okay, well, Matt provided us this information, but here are 3 items that did it. And so it'll intelligently, like a human, respond and say, hey, great, thanks for this information. We're also missing these 3 items. Can you supply us this info? And so that way it's interfacing, collecting that information, and then it'll eventually get turned over to a human to actually enter it or maybe ask some additional questions. And so we're doing that. We're also doing it from an operational standpoint where it's listening to our call recordings because we record everything from a training standpoint like most businesses do. And that way too, we have something to refer back to in case there was a service issue we have to address. But what this AI software does is it evaluates it and says, hey, your service rep either understood what the issue was, maybe they didn't, maybe the client was frustrated, maybe the information was inaccurate, and it kind of scores all these things. And so it'll highlight and say, here's a call recording you need to go listen to. And so then our management staff will go and listen to that call recording and say, okay, I see a training opportunity here. They didn't know how to handle this situation. And so what can we do to give them the tools and the training so they can provide the next client a better experience on a similar topic? And so there's a lot of different areas that we're doing that. And then also operationally with our GPS software, our telematics, we have cameras that are outward facing and inward facing. And that's done for safety reasons, both for our team and the passengers, as well as if we were to get in an accident, because in reality, you do as many miles as we do, you're going to get in accidents, whether it's your fault or not. And so it uses AI to identify drowsiness. So if someone's eyes start getting real heavy and things of that nature, if they're picking up the mobile phone, and trying to be on their phone while they're driving, distracted driving, accelerator called jackrabbit starts, hard braking, hard cornering, all these things. And so it'll kind of create the scorecard and it'll say, if you're one of our chauffeurs, Matt, it'll say, hey, Matt has a rating of 78 when everyone else is at 90 seven or higher out of 100. And we'll say, okay, well, let's go look at Matt. Why is he only at 78? Well, he keeps getting on his cell phone. So even though we don't have our eyes in the vehicle, that essentially is our eyes. And so now we can work with you and say, okay, Matt, for you to continue working here and driving safely, you got to stay off your cell phone, right? And we can also create alerts that will also give an audible to them. And I've tested it where you pick up your phone, it'll say, please put your phone down. And so, it gives you an audible in the car to do that. Or if you're following too close to the car in front of you, it'll give you an audible alert saying, please, create more distance. And so it helps us to try to mitigate and avoid situations before they actually occur. And so there's a lot of different ways that artificial intelligence is coming into play within our logistics business. And there's more to come, but those are just some of the key things that we have implemented and or are working on right now.
I love it. It's all about customers and client safety.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely the best way to go. And I can already see the driver's face turn red when he hears "put your phone down" while driving. I mean, that's probably right now. I mean, the number one. I don't have the statistics, but number one cause for all the accidents on the roads. You see people constantly on the phone. And we're guilty
Yep.
of course as well. Sometimes we do that, and it's definitely increase the risk of us getting into accidents. Now, final two questions for if you look back, or if you had a chance to talk to Jorge from 2007, 8, 9, what advice would you give him
Mm.
that he could benefit from?
Oh, that's a good question. I wish you would have given me that one in advance. So I could have thought about it. What advice would I give me when I first started out? You know what? I probably would have. I would tell myself to go all in sooner. For 3.5 years, I worked my full time job, and I started this business, which wasn't a full time job. Like it wasn't a side hustle where I was doing it 10 hours a week. Like I was fully engaged. Where I was working 70 to 80 hours a week for 3.5 years every week. And if I was on vacation from my primary job, I was 100% working that same 78, 80 hour week in the business I was trying to start because I didn't want to cheat my primary employer because it's not fair to them. They didn't know I was starting this business and they're not paying me to start another business. So I was 100% committed to them. I wouldn't waver from that. But then I also wanted this to be successful. And so it finally got to the point where physically I couldn't do it anymore. Like I could feel the stress in my neck and my shoulders, and I was tired. And my wife told me like you're grumpy all the time, like this, like if you want me and the kids, like you got to figure something out because we're not going to go like this forever. And so I finally built up the business where I felt it was safe to give up my full-time IT career and just jump into this business altogether. But that's the one thing is you got to go forward. You can't really dabble. And so that would have been one of the advice I'd give me is just do it sooner, maybe after 6 months to a year, and just go all in. Because what it did is it hindered my ability to grow a little quicker because I wasn't out there doing sales and things of that nature. I was just trying to take care of the clients that were coming in. And so we we're very fortunate that it grew organically over time. And the reason why I say that is because once I did go fully in the first year, we increased our business threefold in the first year. And so that's the advice I give myself is just go all in and do it sooner.
And I'm already inspired by your work ethic, and I think more can take away from it, definitely. And that's a great advice for sure. I mean, we're entrepreneurs are risk takers, and that's the risk you took, and it paid off. Obviously, there's family behind it that you need to provide, but that's a great advice right there. Now, what's if you look forward next 5, 10 years, what's the next big milestone that you trying to reach or you're going to reach? Because you're a hustler and you never stop.
Yeah, so kind of one big goal for me is it's not even about the exit strategy, but one big goal for me is I want to take a month off where I'm disconnected even from email. Because right now I have a great team behind me where I've taken a couple weeks off, but I'm still connected with my mobile phone. I still will check in with the email, and then but I always have someone I can pass something on to so the client's taken care of. I want to reach that stage where, like, you know what? Unless there's a severe emergency, don't call me, don't text me, and I'm not checking my email. That to me is like a big goal I want to get to, and I feel like I can get there. I recently hired an executive assistant, so she helps me to monitor my email and make sure that, hey, if something needs to be handled quickly, she knows exactly who within the organization to pass that on to. And so I think that's another step in that direction. But for me, I want to take more advantage of AI to help us operationally, because it's no secret that employees are your biggest expense. Like our insurance is expensive, but it's still a fraction of what it is to hire people. And so it's not because I want to get rid of people, but that'll allow me to grow and scale and be even more responsive to my clients without having to add more people. Because the more people you add, not only does it get more expensive, but it gets more complex to manage. And so if we can take these rudimentary tasks, such as taking an email with all the information we have and just doing data input into our system, like that, I can see AI should be able to handle 100% of that. Right? Being able to provide a simple quote to a client, being able someone to send in a text or call and saying, hey, where's my vehicle? What's the ETA of my vehicle? Like, there's no reason why AI can't utilize our GPS technology and say, okay, well, here it is. By the way, your ETA to your pickup, I'm going to confirm your pickup is 123 Main Street. The ETA there is 7 minutes. And by the way, here's also a link so you can track your vehicle. Now, we can provide the linkage, but for AI to supply that, we don't have to speak to someone. Like, that can be done very quickly. And in our industry, it's not about just doing a small amount of trips. There is volume to it to be able to support all the expenses that we have. And so we obviously need to increase our volume, increase the utilization of our fleet to maximize the value that it can have to the organization. So there's ways where I can easily see within 5 years that I would think at least 50% of our operation can be done through automation in that regard. And not just to be technology savvy and kind of be the cool kids on the block, but to provide a real-time immediate experience for our clients and be able to get them information into their hands immediately versus waiting for a rep to become available. You're on hold time. Okay, I've helped one client, now let me go help another, because I'm one person. Right, I can only really focus on one, maybe poorly two people at once with the chat and maybe a phone call. Where with AI, we can take on hundreds, if not thousands, of transactions simultaneously without even engaging one person. And so that's where I'd really like to take my business, where finding all those key points where it won't negatively impact the customer experience, actually provide them a higher level of service and automate that. And so I can continue to grow and scale my business without it being too painful, because we've grown year over year before. Our best year we grew year over year was 185. It was great in terms of the top line revenue, but man, was that painful for the people that were on my team at that time. And they flat out told me, don't ever do that again. Like, we understand we need to grow, but at that pace, it was just too painful. It was too much volume at once, and everybody felt it.
I can see some AI workforce or infrastructure to take the load of some of those tasks. Like there's relevance that AI has been growing, and they got some investors, big investors from what I'm hearing. There is N8N, that's a complicated name. I don't know why they came up with that. That does it, or make.com, that essentially allows you to build a AI agent that goes from one task to another, from one task to another, and at any step you can have a human intervention. So if you need someone to check on it, make sure that, hey, the quote looks good, then you just hit one button and it goes, essentially
Right.
it's being sent out. There's definitely complexity with your system, because you have to make sure that you have the actual vehicle, the right time. So there's definitely, I can imagine, some complexities with it, but it's becoming better and better. The language models are becoming so strong that and powerful that they can do things like that. Things that we do repeatedly, I feel like
Yep.
they can be trained on much quicker than something like this requires thinking, or maybe some experience, or just being a human and knowing what how a human would react to something. So definitely the future. Now, if someone needs transportation, whether it's a corporate client or someone like a celebrity or influencer, how they can find you or your company and get a quote from whether an AI or a human being.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, whatever they prefer, whether you want to, whether it's the bot, whether it's a live chat, text, phone call, email, online portal. Like, we basically want to make it convenient. Whatever your preference is to engaging with us, we offer that to you. So to reach us, you can go to ridehermes.com. That's ride, HERMES.com. Our phone number, again, you can call or text. We are staffed 24/7. I have a US based team. I also got a team based in Serbia as well. that helps us, and so they're part of our team. In fact, we just had a few of them here in town that we hosted just so they can get a lay of the land here. But that they help us to provide that 24/7 coverage. So there's no call center. You got to wait for a call back. They're actually team members of ours. And so those are ways to reach us. If you prefer email, it's reserve, and that's RESERVE at hermesworldwide.com. We'd love the opportunity to see if we can help you out. But by all means, even if we could just help from a consultation perspective, I've done that many times with clients where they have a supplier, but they just need some advice, and I'm happy to help them out as much as I can to just be a resource for them.
Fantastic. And I love the Slavic accent from, not from Serbia, but I had many Serbian friends and Slavic as well myself. So I love the
Okay,
Slavic accent there.
nice.
It was great hosting you, Jorge. Thank you so much for all the advice you shared with us. We went actually right above an hour, so it was quite a good conversation. Please stay on for final words. Yeah, thank you so much for today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Matt.